And begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We need to approve the agenda. Attorney Nuttall has said that there is an additional item that we'll consider or add to the agenda. So I need a motion.
I couldn't hear you, Sheree.
We will be adding an additional item at the end before adjournment.
What is that item?
I don't know. Attorney Nuttall mentioned that she had something she wanted to add.
I have a document to distribute regarding the litigation.
I'm sorry?
A document to distribute regarding the litigation.
It's a document concerning what?
A litigation hold.
A litigation hold?
Yes.
I just want to know what I'm voting for.
So anyway, we do need a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of that item.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Phil and second by Rachel to approve the agenda. And now have people had an opportunity to go through the rather extensive minutes from our last meeting?
We should vote on that motion.
Oh, we should. Thank you. All in favor of approving the agenda with the addition, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, we have approved the agenda. Now we'll go on to the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections? Larry?
I have some questions I know Kay had said at one point that we needed a bigger place, and we talked about Lewiston, we talked about the Tau Center. It might be minor, but in the wintertime in Minnesota, I don't like to have the taxpayers rent the building and it's cold. So next time I think we ought to have some heat. But it's almost like it was solar, and when the sun went down, it got cold. I don't know how they heat that place, but that's one.
Not very well.
Thinking the people were going to heat it, but yeah, I noticed that too.
We have probably 200 of our most outstanding citizens in that building, and then we don't provide something so they can stay warm. I think we need to do better next time.
Right.
Number two, and I brought this up, it's in the minutes, so that's why I think it's pertinent at this time. I have more experience, years on this board than anybody else. We didn't used to have this findings of fact by the county staff. We used to find our own facts based on the information they gave us. And now we're getting, just in the last, I think it's a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years, we're not, according to our interview that we had with Stephanie at this last meeting, it's in the minutes, we were asked about, did we make up our mind yet? Did we, da-da-da? There might have been some fibbing going on at that point. I don't know. But the point is, the staff made up their mind. The staff, according to the Winona Daily News front page a week earlier, had said this particular petition did not meet 4 of the 8 criteria for this petition. And I'm saying, frankly, if the staff is going to decide, why do we have a meeting?
Madam Chair, just for the record, this is the item number 6 on the agenda is to discuss procedures. If we want to have a full discussion of that.
Okay. Would that suit you to just move that to item 6?
I'm not quite done yet.
All right.
If I may. I'm glad we're discussing it. I did not know exactly what we were discussing. That's why I asked. But the point is, you folks don't remember what before, when we didn't have these, this does meet, this does not meet. That's what they give us now. That's what they gave us at the last Board of Adjustment meeting. And even before we got all the facts from all the people that came and spoke to us that day. They made this conclusion prior to that. And then the other thing that bugs me just a little bit, according to my legal counsel, I was asked a what we thought was pertinent question about my grandson. And according to my legal counsel, that was not necessary. The question on whether there was any financial interest between me and the petitioners, that's a legitimate question. But the other one, according to my legal counsel, was not necessary, and if it gets asked again, there'll be a different answer, and it might not be pleasant. And that's all I have for now.
Okay. Would anyone else have any comments about the minutes or corrections or changes or additions to the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Right, motion by Phil, second by Rachel to approve the minutes. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. The minutes are approved. We'll move on to docket BOA 321-1901 to consider the petition of Perry and Maddie Beachy of Hazelton, Iowa, and Craig and Joan Ferrier of Dover, Minnesota, in regards to the following: a variance to allow a building site established on Class 2 soil type instead of the required Class 4 through Class 8 soil types pursuant to Chapter 10.4.7, Number 6 of the Winona County zoning ordinance.
Madam Chair, before we move to open this, I was just passed a note, and I guess for your consideration, maybe for what it's worth, we just received a phone call from the applicant of this one, Perry Beachy, and he said to relay that he was running 20 to 30 minutes behind the lake. So if you want to continue and have a public hearing on this, or if you want to change your agenda to take these items first.
Well, that seems really reasonable. Does that work for everybody else?
Sure.
So let's see. Do we do this as a motion then to change our agenda since we approved this?
I think that would be the safest course of action.
All right. Rather than considering number 5 right now, why don't we move on to number 6 and 7, the additional item from Stephanie? And then when Mr. Perry gets here, then we will go forward with this, with the petition. Do I have a motion?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
Moved by Rachel and seconded by Phil to change our agenda around. So this will be discussion regarding procedures.
So at the last county board meeting, we were, excuse me, got a dry throat today. The last county board meeting, we were asked to have a discussion with both the Board of Adjustment and the Planning Commission regarding the procedures that are being used to present you with your materials for your meetings, in particular relating to the docket packets. It was, I think, 4 years ago, that we changed the procedures, and there were a number of reasons why that happened, and those were done in consultation with both the Planning Commission and the Board of Adjustment, and as we revised them to find things that worked for everyone. Reasons why we did that is because after attending several trainings, after I think both Kay and I were at a couple of different trainings that were taught by both MCIT and other agencies regarding the best way of making land use decisions and the most supportable way of making land use decisions was to follow more formalized procedures that resulted in written findings. When I first started, 2014, is that when I started doing the land use stuff? Seems like a while ago. There were none. What was happening was we would come into these meetings and we would have a petition, and within a few minutes we would hear, I move to approve,
everybody says yes, good to go. There weren't findings based on the record. There weren't well-reasoned decisions. So we started making some changes in order to accommodate that. Now, and through the evolution of that process, our procedures have come to, when the application comes in, staff does what it normally does, which is to evaluate everything, make sure all the materials are there, pull together all the information that has been previously requested relating to these land use decisions. That might be history of the property, that might be history in Winona County, that might be the information from the comprehensive plan, from the zoning ordinance, all the things that are relevant to the land use decisions. From there, staff, as required by the zoning ordinance, prepares a recommendation and a staff report for you. That recommendation and staff report changes all the time. It's primarily depending on who is the department head, but I've seen in my time a number of different iterations as well. However, the ordinance does require staff to make a recommendation. Based on that recommendation, based on the information there, I also assist with preparing draft findings based on what that staff report says. And as you know, and as we've been training, I think through the last 3 years worth of the land use decision-making trainings that we've put on, those written findings are always modifiable. You've done that a number of times. So we come in, we flag in red the ones where the criteria is not met so that you can discuss those and make sure that that's what you think as well. There's numerous discussions and revisions. And from the feedback we were getting, that is the process that works best for most. It may not work the best for everyone, but we've gotten good feedback for a long time on that. What we're hoping for today is to find out if there's any suggested revisions to that process, because we want to make sure that you're getting the information that you need, but that we're also coming out at the end with the legal findings that are then supportable should the need arise. And so that's why we give you a draft to start with, because a lot of times it's easier to start with a draft of something and modify as opposed to trying to create from scratch, because that proved to be time consuming and difficult when we did try to do it that way. So we were asked to present that up front. It's also why you get them now in your packets as opposed to the day of, because it was easier to then come in and hopefully revise those if needed. So with that, any questions, suggestions, concerns?
Larry?
Eric, how long have you been working here?
26 years.
Has it ever been challenged in court, a finding of the Board of Adjustment?
There's been decisions that have been challenged based on the findings.
How many?
Maybe about a half a dozen in the last 25 years.
Okay. Since I've been coming here, there's been none, I don't think, in the last 4 or 5 years, whatever it was. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it is one thought I have. But the other thing is, if you're going to recommend, you should say recommend. It doesn't say that in our last petition. It says does not meet. It doesn't say we think it does not meet. It says we say it does not meet, and that's not a recommendation, and that's probably why the Daily News came up with that. It doesn't sound like a recommendation in the minutes.
And we can do that. We can go in, I think one of the discussions that we've had is in the staff reports say that based on the available information at this time, staff does not believe that it meets the criteria and recommends whatever. We can do it that way. But that is why the findings that we present you with do have the word draft on them, so that they're not final. They are there to be amended.
So the draft finding protects you from, if somebody comes like to our last Board of Adjustment meeting, 100 people or whatever spoke, that when you already made the decision or the recommendation, and I won't call it recommendation because that's not what it said. When you folks made the decision to say this does not comply a week ahead of time, and then 100 people, give or take, spoke, and something that they said might have changed our mind, you asked us specifically that day, did you make up your mind yet?
Correct.
And we said no. Everybody said no? But you had made up your mind a week ahead of time.
We had provided a recommendation based on the information. That's what we've talked about in every land use training we've done over the last several years, is that we're presenting you with the recommendation based on the information available at the time. That may change. We've come in a number of times, actually, I can think of, 2, where we've come in and said that our recommendation relating to a criteria has changed based on information that has come in after the fact. And we always make sure that that's part of the staff presentation as well. One thing I think I forgot to mention is that the reason for the written findings, you said that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The reason why written findings are so important, especially well-reasoned ones, is because if we have those, the burden is on the challenger to prove that we didn't make a reasonable decision. If we don't have those, the burden is on us to prove that we did. And that is a heavy burden to shift back and forth. So the having of the findings protects the decision that's being made by this board. And it is your decision. We're not making a decision. We're providing our recommendation to hopefully assist you in making the well-supported decisions.
And last month we did change, I mean, we did not adopt the draft as it was written by staff. We did change two of them. So there is, I mean, I think there is room for us to, I mean, my opinion certainly changed on one or two of the criteria as I gathered more information from the Daly's presentation and from the presentation from their lawyer.
I'm still hung up on the fact that, number one, it said this variance request is not in harmony with the intent and purpose of the ordinance. That's not a recommendation. To me, that's is not, no. It should say something like, staff thinks that this may not be in harmony, or something like that. But when you say it like that, that's like a court of law that says we're not in favor of this. This is wrong.
If I can explain that, the draft findings are something where if you agree with it, you should just be able to say, yes, we want this, check the box to approve it. That's why it's written as though it's your decision. But it does say draft so that you can amend it. The staff report does contain that language of staff believes that this criteria is not met. And we can put something in there that makes sure that it's crystal clear that the staff report and the associated findings are a recommendation.
Madam Chair, in coming up on my second year in my tenure as the County Planning and Environmental Services Director, I will state categorically that staff is crystal clear on the fact that what they're producing is a draft findings based on a moment in time when the staff report is produced and based on the zoning ordinance and a comparison of the petition to same in conjunction with the legal department. At no point do we think that the facts that are obtained in a hearing or that the debate by the Board of Adjustments or the Planning Commission for that matter are not the important part of the equation. As technical staff, we produce what we hope is the most professional report. And in fact, in my tenure, I will state that I have seen absolutely no difficulties with the Board of Adjustment and Planning Commission doing their due diligence, changing findings, changing conditions, and so on, as they should, because our point of time technical reference is merely a guideline, and in fact, we have been complimented on the same. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Could I call on someone in the audience?
May I approach? Thank you. Marie Cavesi, 133 Whispering Lane. I also was outraged at the Winona Daily News article. In fact, I called the editor and I called the reporter, Tobias Mann, because to me it was presented as if the staff had already decided. And I explained to Tobias, he's fairly new. He's about the fourth different Daily News local reporter we've had in my almost 5 years of serving on the board. So that's what happens in that local position. And I explained to him that I didn't appreciate the language, that it appeared to the public that it had been decided before the public hearing and before the meeting and the discussion. And I explained the procedure to him, that the information with the draft language goes out to the Board of Adjustment and to the public, and then the Board of Adjustment holds their meeting with a public hearing, and then each finding of fact is discussed at your level, and then the language is either modified or you make a decision about the use of the language, and that the reason we have it that way, this is what I explained to Mr. Mann, the reason we have it that way is so that it moves the meetings along faster, the discussion is more focused, and you have something to start with. It's not always your ending result. And so that's what I explained to Mr. Mann and also to the editor. And I also complained to our administrator at that time. So I just wanted to put that in, that article was very misleading. They said they would add to the online version, they would add an additional statement, but they never corrected or explained, any further the print version. And as you know, when something's out in print, so that was my reaction to that article and to that information in the article. I thought it was very misleading and actually inaccurate. So just wanted you to know that.
I do have one additional thing, and I'm kind of going to skip to the other item that we had added to the agenda today and distribute this.
I would like to say, as regards the discussion on procedure, this is my 5th year on Board of Adjustment. And I do remember when we didn't have such thorough recommendations and finding from planning. And sometimes we would really kind of wallow around up here because not everybody who is serving knows the zoning ordinances as well as staff. And so I personally have found this very helpful. It is easy. I mean, you could just fall into following it, but I see that it doesn't always happen that way. So, and to have the appropriate language should it ever be challenged, I think is important.
I did just distribute a memorandum from our office. It is protected by attorney-client privilege, so all I'm going to say about it at this point, I'll ask you to read it when you have a chance, is that we should not be discussing any particular meeting, the particular meeting from last month, but we should be discussing, in general, is there information that would help, or is there anything that we're doing that hurts your ability to review the information and make findings that we can document in writing? So if you have any suggestions, we'd love to hear them. We always want to make the process better for you.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
I don't deny that it's easier with the board. And you can call it a recommendation, but when it says is or is not, I disagree with that. But it's easier to have them do all the legwork and we just rubber stamp it. But we did change a couple, but it didn't change the outcome. But it seems to me that our job is to decide, and if we have a question, we should ask staff, what do you think about this? How should we look at this? If there's any particular thing that we are missing or that we're struggling with? And I struggled with a few. I was chair one time, and I still think about that one meeting where there was a shed someplace, but anyway, that is our job, to go do our homework and what do they call that, or due diligence, and if we're just going to come in and they're going to make it easy for us because of all this stuff, and I think we signed up for something a little more in depth than that. And like when Richard was on, if it was down in his end of the county, he'd go take a look at things and report to us. And Phil and I have done the same up in our end of the county. And I don't know about you folks that live in the city, if you ever get out and look at some of these things.
I do.
But that's, in my opinion, let's not give too much power away. Let's keep it here, and if we screw up too bad, if they start suing us when we're completely in charge, well, then we got a reason to try and look at something differently. But I think that I'm not in favor of giving more power to staff. And I don't know, you're not looking for a vote or anything, you're just looking for discussion, right?
Recommendations, suggestions, anything that you have as far as we can.
Well, that's what I have.
Right. I guess I don't see it as giving the power to staff. I think that that sits here because this is the group of people that makes the decision. And I certainly admire that you go out and look at sites. I do as well, as much as I am able, not every time. And Eric and Lou have always been very open and present for questions. If there's something you don't understand or you want more information, and certainly I know I have availed myself of that. So, are there any recommendations that people wanted to make, or is?
Madam Chair, one other quick comment. Commissioner Ward brought to the department's attention that a watermark that said draft was missing from an online copy of the last month's petition. And we discovered that the document, the PDF document of the findings of fact as it comes from legal office that says the word draft, as it has the entire time of my tenure and certainly before that, we're having a little computer software glitch that when it's getting incorporated into the packet that it disappeared again. And it's very clearly in and on the attorney's office copy. So we're working that software glitch out, but I wanted the Board of Adjustments to rest assured that the word draft is always intended to be on. We will continue to keep it on, and staff always considers that it is a draft and it's a draft department. Thank you.
So, having discussed these two items, I'm not quite sure where to go with this and Mr. Perry.
Where does it say draft?
All right.
I see draft, Joe?
As I mentioned.
Well, I think we've stalled as long as we can, so, again, the decision to, actually take action on it is up to you, based on information here. And also, I just wanted to point out there was a late addition to the packet. There was a email that we received from a representative of a neighboring property with just a sentence or two. Also, just a late addition that we had to just pass out is a letter that we received from the current property owner of this petition. So if you haven't seen that, I guess take a look at that. Okay, agenda item 321-19-1. This request pertains to a variance to build a new dwelling on prime soils, in this case, a Class 2 soil. The request is involving roughly, I think, 118 acres, and it's two parcels. The main parcel is 14,000,020,000, and that is the portion of the property in which the applicant wishes to construct a new house upon, as well as two agricultural buildings. Soil map right next to that shows that it'd be roughly in the northwest portion of that acreage. In looking at that single parcel, the larger of the two, roughly 55% of that entire parcel is considered prime. So the Winona County zoning ordinance, we distinguish 40% or less as the ratio of considering the entirety of the parcel, whether or not it meets that standard. So either you have to build off of a prime soil or you have to have a parcel configuration that is less than 40%. So in this case, we have both things working against this request for that standard. This entire parcel is 55% prime, and they wish to construct on a portion of it that is prime. The applicant has submitted a letter that explains the circumstances. They wish to have a certified organic farm, and they also wish to milk cattle. I think in his comments, he'd roughly have, I believe, 25, let me see here to get my facts, 29 cows, some 20 various heifers, replacement animals, and also raising calves and 6 to 8 horses in addition to that. This would preliminarily exceed 50 animal units, so the individual, if this is successful, would have to work with the feedlot officer on some degree of feedlot permitting for both the runoff and the manure management for this property. Got some 2 clips of the video. I'll try to narrate. I don't know how the audio is, so we're going to play it by ear. So, and you might want to turn it down if possible. The first clip part is shown from that northwest quarter. We are in section 29 of Saratoga Township. Right off of the township road. And this is in regards to Board of Adjustment, agenda item 32119, number 1. The house would be the closest in regards to the Perry Beachy with the ag buildings and Craig Ferrier variance to allow a building site established on Class 2 soil types instead of the required 4 through 8, according to Chapter 10.4.7, number 6 of the Winona County zoning ordinance. It's a gravel road. It's a township road. That's Cocker Drive, and we're looking to the west at that point. Essentially, this footage will be shot from Cocker Drive, which I'm currently located on. This is a Saratoga Township road. The applicant has indicated that there's 2 parcels that make up the project. One containing 78.5, which is this acreage near the north more that abuts Cocker Drive, as well as a back 40 that's located more to the south, and that's a 40-acre segment. So altogether, I believe it's 118.5 acres that the applicant wishes to buy and homestead. In regards to the applicant's proposal, I believe I'm kind of in the corner. I believe the adjacent neighboring property owner to the west, I think it indicated is owned by Cleo Miller according to the applicant's site plan. But anyway, the applicants have indicated that they would wish to construct a house approximately 130 or so feet off of the township road. And then as you're going further to the south, they wish to construct kind of a metal building and an additional barn for his mechanic. You can turn the volume off. It's getting pretty windy. Okay, just continue on. Obviously, I didn't get a chance to walk very deep into the property because this was most of the snow and snow melt at this point. I'm zooming into the south, and there you can see there's a deep incised runoff pattern that goes to the south, and that's also with where the other 40 acres is connected. I guess kind of refer to your GIS map. And in the distance, you can see the neighboring residence that would be kind of to the southeast from the building site. And that neighboring dwelling, it essentially makes up the eastern border of the acreage. And that house, I believe, has an easement that comes off of Cocker Drive or the township road. And I'm kind of scanning now to the east. That kind of shows that. That's what I think I'm trying to point out, is that it's a narrow driveway that goes to that building site. If this applicant was to pursue building on non-prime soils in the back 40, they would have to work with that neighbor. They'd have to cross that property, and then that's not even to mention the terrain that's involved with the topography. I'm looking now at the nearest neighboring dwelling that is directly to the east. It sits on the north side of the township road. There is also a feedlot on that site. There's one map exhibit in your packet that shows approximately what 1,000 feet looks like from that feedlot to where the applicant wishes to build a house. Now looking at the north side of the road and the type of ground, and back to the west in that general direction. And then there's just one quick clip that shows now about where the driveway would be. That's looking back to the west along Cocker Drive and showing where the building site was in that area. And this is right across the road then from the neighbor and the feedlot building that they have. Again, this is where the vehicles parked is the private driveway, and that's where it makes mention to the easement. And just the type of pattern, there's several dry runs that converse, and then they actually come down, and it follows that deep ravine. So that's kind of got some issues as far as just the pattern of runoff that would be associated with the rear or the southern property. Kind of taking a look at the segment of woods and location there. Saratoga Township did meet with the applicant last month, and I believe they offer no comments as it refers to this current request. And with that, I guess I'll take any questions or turn it over to the public hearing.
Any questions for Eric? Is the land currently farmed?
Yes.
Row crops, pasture?
Combination, you can see where it's woods and then there's grass strips and then there is some row cropping with it.
Would the petitioners wish to speak?
We should open the public hearing or not?
I think you invite the petitioners first. So, Mr. Perry or Ms. Ferrier, would you like to say anything?
I don't.
You would need to come up and speak into the microphone, and we need your name and your address.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry about being late. So there's a lot of curves from between here and home. My name is Perry Arbici. My address is 1370 Grant Avenue, Hazelton, Iowa, 50641. I guess I don't really have any, I don't know what, I'll answer any questions you have or any information you want to know. Never been to a variance before or don't know much about them, I guess.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Ferrier, or Beachy, I'm sorry? Well, we may have drawn you up here for nothing. No questions?
Could you tell us about your family?
We have 11 children. The oldest is 15, I believe. We have a dairy farm back at home with milk dairy cows and send milk to Organic Valley and farm rotation. And we'd like to do the same up here. Like to move the cows up and have a family farm like we did at home, I guess. Looks like decent ground to farm, fertile ground or farmable ground, I guess. Location I liked. How many feet is on the Cocker Drive on the road surface?
Is that 2 rods, Eric?
Yeah, the right of way is 66 feet, so it's 33 feet from the center of what is considered road right of way. As far as what you own along there, I'd say that's probably close to a quarter mile or 1,320 feet.
40 rods, that's what I thought. As far as the distance, there should be plenty of distance for the 1,000 feet from the Detweiler residence. I believe that's Detweiler. If I go in the corner there.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Beachy? Okay, we might call you up again. You never
Okay.
can tell. And then, Ms. Ferrier.
Yeah. Never done this before, but I'm already a little worried about Larry.
Yeah, I would be too.
Anyway, my name is Joan Ferrier. Our address is 5914 County Road 10, Southeast Dover, Minnesota. My husband Craig couldn't be here because we have another family commitment he had to be at. And I had sent an email to Eric with a couple thoughts, just, saying that we really felt we farmed this land for 42 years, and we aren't quitting because there's anything wrong. We just are trying to downsize. We're in business with our in-laws, and he's 92 years old and still farming, so we're kind of trying to get things a little bit closer to home. And with meeting, my husband has met with Mr. Beachy and, learned a lot about his family and what he wants to do, and just felt this would be a real good fit. They have a lot of other community members in the area down there. Right across the road is another community member, and I know there's some question about the variance and the distance and that from some things, and I'm not, because I didn't come to any of the other meetings, I don't know 100%, but I'm sure there maybe is some workable things that could be worked out too, if there's any questions in that. And we just thought, he wants a nice area to raise his family, and that is a good area, It's a beautiful place, so. And that's it, I guess, or does anybody need to know anything else from me?
Any questions for Ms. Ferrier? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we need to open the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved by Phil and seconded by Rachel. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Is there anyone who would wish to speak for or against this petition? Please step forward, state your name. Is there anyone who would wish to speak for or against this petition? And for the third and final time, is there anyone who would want to speak for or against this petition?
Motion to close public speaking.
Seconded.
Moved by Phil and seconded by Rachel to close the public meeting. So we need to discuss. Are there comments or discussion? Oh. Someday I'm going to get all of this. All in favor of closing the public meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Thank you. All right, the public meeting is closed, so we need to go through the criteria. Is there any discussion? It's a quiet group here today. Well, then I think I will read through the criteria. This is the draft from staff. The variance request is in harmony with the intent and purpose of the ordinance. The Agricultural and Resource Conservation Zoning District is established for the purpose of protecting the working agricultural landscape of Winona County as a means to ensure the continued viability of this resource. This petition to allow a new farmstead would allow a new farming family to live and work on their land and does not jeopardize the viability of agriculture in this area. making it in harmony with the intent and purpose of this ordinance. Are we in agreement with this?
I agree.
Pardon?
I agree.
Larry?
So far, so good.
I agree.
Okay. The variance request is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan generally supports the preservation and promotion of agricultural lands and uses, making this petition consistent. This petition is to allow for the placement of the structures on productive agricultural land that will remove some land from production, but the structures on productive ag land that will remove some land from production, but the structures are primarily farm-related ag buildings and a farm dwelling. The variance request is not consistent with avoidance of prime farmland, but the proposal as represented is an attempt to disrupt the least amount of prime tillable farmland. The variance being then consistent with the comprehensive plan. Are we in agreement with this?
I agree.
I agree.
Larry?
Well, it's confusing. It says the variance request is not consistent with the avoidance of prime farmland. And it says the comprehensive plan supports the preservation and promotion of agriculture, making the petition consistent. So I got two statements out of there that contradict each other.
I think it is that, but the proposal is an attempt to disrupt the least amount of prime tillable.
That's a negotiable term right there.
Pardon?
That's a negotiable term right there. Let's come back to that one after we look at the rest. Can we do that or no?
Sure.
Okay. Number 3, the applicant has established that there are practical difficulties in complying with the official control and proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner. The building location that has been chosen is closest to the road for relative ease of access and to avoid a long driveway. This location avoids the better cropland. The majority of the farm contains prime soils, which is the practical difficulty to complying with the official controls. This proposal is reasonable and would serve the farming operation best and impact prime soils and agricultural fields the least. Are we in agreement that there are practical difficulties have been established?
I agree.
Larry?
Not sure.
Well, we may have to come back then and vote on these. Number 4, the variance request is due to special conditions or circumstances unique to the property, not created by owners of the property since enactment of the ordinance. The special conditions of Class 4 and 8 are not created by the petitioners, but are related to the property and absence of practical alternatives to accomplish the goal of establishing a farmstead. When all acreage is considered comprehensively, the site represents the best attempt to comply with Winona County zoning regulations.
I'll agree with that one right away.
I agree with that one.
And Phil?
Yes.
Number 5, the variance will not alter the essential character of the locality, nor substantially impair property values or the public health, safety, or welfare in the vicinity. The variance would allow a farm dwelling and farmstead that will have a similar character to other agricultural farmsteads in the vicinity. Are we in agreement with this?
Agree.
I don't have a problem with that one.
Yeah, I agree.
Pardon? Yes.
That's okay.
Number 6, economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. Economic considerations have not been mentioned as the focus or featured consideration in requesting the variance.
Agree.
I agree.
Well, yes and no. The family's going to try to make money so they can survive and raise their family, so there's economics involved. We can't deny that.
Well,
I mean, it's a business. It's a farm business. It's going to be located in prime agriculture soil, right?
I think this,
And I've never liked this one, because you could argue this one till the cows come home on almost every one. I'm not going to vote against this one, but I'm just saying.
right. I guess it refers to where they're putting the buildings, you know, and I don't think that's an economic consideration. That seems to be kind of with the lay of the land.
Or don't put it there at all, of course.
So are we in agreement with this?
Yes, I am.
Number 7, the variance cannot be alleviated by a reasonable method other than a variance and is the minimum variance which would alleviate the practical difficulty. The petitioner has put considerable thought and time into the consideration of building locations on the property and has not found a location that would be better suited to the farm operation. A reasonable alternative to this variance does not appear to be readily available. The applicant has also indicated that in respect to some of the non-tillable acres that consist of portions of non-prime soils, an alternative variance would then also be required, specifically the 1,000-foot setback from a neighboring dwelling with a feedlot, or the creation of a driveway that would exceed a quarter-mile in length through adverse terrain. Are we in agreement with number 7?
How
That
come
this,
you keep looking at me first?
well, I have to look both ways.
I agree.
I agree.
Oh, number 7. Well, you could say, I don't want to build over there because it's going to be a longer driveway, but that's what the planning and zoning ordinance says, is if you have prime soils, build where there isn't prime soils. But then again, if you have a long driveway and you take out some of the prime soils to get to it, you haven't gained anything, so I'll go along with that one.
Thank you. Number 8, the request is not a use variance and does not have the effect of allowing any use that is not allowed in the zoning district. Permit a lower degree of flood protection than the regulatory flood protection elevation, or permit standards lower than those required by state law. The ARC district permits the construction of agricultural buildings and accessory uses on the parcel. The proposed location is not located in a floodplain, and the request does not lower the degree of flood protection established by the regulatory flood protection elevation or lessen state law standards. So are we in agreement with on number 8?
Agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have 2 we need to go back to. Number 2, the variance request is consistent with the comprehensive plan. 3 of us have agreed that we feel that it is. Larry, do you have any further discussion on this?
What was the first thing you said?
Well, 3 of us agreed that we felt that it was consistent with the
It doesn't
comprehensive
have to
plan.
be unanimous, so that's fine. We'll go with that.
Pardon?
We don't have to be unanimous, so that's fine if we want to do that. I still struggle with the consistent thing about just the class 2 soils. I struggle with that just a little bit.
So shall we say that we have agreed, or would 3 of us have agreed and 1 has not? How would you like that stated?
I think we should go through them and then vote at the end, and that's it.
Just to keep it moving, Madam Chair, I think we should read the conditions that are attached to the approval or denial of this variance.
That makes sense. And loud and clear.
All right? The owners of the property to which this variance is issued will abide by all representations and commitments made during the permitting process, as well as before the Board of Adjustment, in accordance with all conditions to the variance. The petitioner shall obtain the required development certificate and septic permit and comply with all relevant regulations and standards of Winona County and the state of Minnesota. The proposed new driveway shall adhere to the standards described in Chapter 9.7, and petitioners shall obtain a driveway access permit from Saratoga Township if required. Number 4, the establishment of the barn structure and stock of animals on the premises shall comply with Chapter 8.4 of the Winona County zoning ordinance, and the petitioner shall obtain the required feedlot permit. Manure must be managed from the site with design practices incorporated into the feedlot construction to minimize runoff. These are the conditions recommended by staff.
So I just have a question probably for Eric on the development certificate. Or don't you need a permit for a well? Or is that included in that portion of it?
Yes, a development certificate is for any buildings. It'd be for the house and any of the barns, any of the metal pole buildings, that could all be applied for on one application. A septic application would also need to accompany that, as well as probably applying for the new address. So those are the three things that our department would do. Also, if they are putting a new well in, whoever the well driller is, they do need to secure a well permit, and that would be our code department or our environmental services through Ross Dunsmore works on a well permit.
So is the well permit addressed in these?
It's not specifically mentioned, but that would be, if they are going to be drilling a well, they would need to obtain a permit too.
So I would just add number 5 as a condition that a well permit be gotten.
Is that
A question for the petitioner. Do you understand these, or not recommendations, but these, yeah, they are recommendations that we just talked about, all of these? Did you hear that loud and clear? You understand? Maybe in Iowa they have different, I don't know, but I'm just want to make it very clear.
We don't have any, I don't think.
You don't have any?
We don't have to get a permit for anything.
Really?
We can take it, we do it all.
And you want to come here?
I was just going to say, you guys say that.
That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here.
so?
For my country.
You may want to vote on that.
So it's been suggested we add a condition number 5, that if the petitioner puts in a well, that the appropriate permits need to be drawn. Does that say that right?
I have a well permit shall be obtained if required.
All right.
Can I ask a question out of my own curiosity? Does that come from you guys then, or is there another department? And would they always get a well permit?
I'm going to leave Eric.
Yeah, the permitting would be right where the front
Okay.
counter is here, or applications.
Thanks for noticing
Store
that.
office, yeah, it would be through us.
And they're never denied it.
No, I mean, it just has some very standard guidelines, like we have to make sure that a well is a certain amount of feet away from the septic system. Minimum requirements on a well, where a animal feedlot or stocked area is, you just want to incorporate some minimum distances to make sure there's less than any chance for contamination.
Those permits all be obtained here.
Yeah, except for the well, which is part of our department, but we would have a contact person for that. Typically, a well driller, before they drill wells, they pull that permit for the party.
Okay, they take care of
They
that.
usually take care of that part.
Okay.
It's going to cost you a few bucks, though, you understand. All these permits are not free.
So, all right, so, well, we have discussed all the criteria, and on 6 of the 8, we are in agreement. Do we want to vote to accept this? How would you like to move forward? Do you need more discussion, Larry, since you had some questions on 2 and 3?
I move we grant the variance
Do we have a second?
With the following conditions.
with all the conditions that we just talked about,
Correct.
including the last one about the well.
Right?
We have to be very clear about that.
Does that also include adopting the findings as proposed?
Yes, I assume that's what you mean. Do we have a second for this?
I second.
Larry has moved and Rachel has second. seconded that we adopt the findings as presented and the conditions with the addition of number 5, a well permit shall be obtained if required. All in favor of accepting this, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
Well, you should hit the gavel just to show off that you got one.
Or not.
She gets to read this yet.
So, Mr. Beachy and Ms. Ferrier, all decisions by the Board of Adjustment in granting variances or in hearing appeals from any administrative order, requirement, decision, or determination shall be final, except that any aggrieved person or persons or any department, board, or commission of the jurisdiction or of the state shall have the right to appeal within 30 days after receipt of notice of the decision to the district court in the county in which the land is located on questions of law and fact. Any party that would like to submit an appeal to the decision rendered at the public hearing must do so to the district court. Planning and Environmental Services is not responsible for filing the appeal or obtaining representation by counsel for the petitioner. So, congratulations on your variance and good luck with your undertaking.
Welcome to Minnesota, and be sure and pay your taxes.
Madam Chair, motion to adjourn?
Of course. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.